All right. Hello, lovely people. This is our second training, the HWISE-USA second training in our series of trainings we're offering. This one is on using SurveyCTO, navigating around in it, what kind of options are available to you. The first training video and the slides and the notes to it are already available. I've emailed those around to those who've been active participants in our monthly site PI meetings. But if you'd like access to those, please email me, jeremiah.osgo@tamu.edu, and I can make those available to you as well. We also have those available to you in all the links to the slides and the video recordings of these trainings available in our SurveyCTO, it's called SurveyCTO Resources for HWISE document that you should have access to as well. Okay, well, let's get started. Okay, so I think I'm sharing my slides here. This is, as I mentioned, the second in our HWISE-USA trainings that we're providing for researchers who are utilizing the HWISE-USA survey. But this is also a valuable training for those in other contexts as well. We have a number of colleagues in, for example, in the EuroWISE context that this training would also be helpful for. Working in CTO, just to get you familiar with what it looks like. We have a number of resources available to us to help us become more familiar with SurveyCTO. We have the first training was called Developing Your Survey. It was all about how you put together your survey, and I'll give a very brief overview of that here today. But we also have a number of other resources available through SurveyCTO. They have a tremendous amount of resources, both in a library, how-to videos, quick start guides, and a vibrant user community. And I'll talk about those more towards the end. What we're going to be talking about today, however, is navigating around and using SurveyCTO. But let me first give a very quick refresher on what we did in the last training, which was talk about putting together your survey. Where we start was, if you haven't seen that training, I'll put a link in the comments down here below as well. And there'll be notes. The notes document also has a link to the video recording and the slide deck for that training. That training, in very brief, covered how we go about turning our data dictionary, where all of our questions reside. Recall we have a core required set of modules. These are a handful of modules that everybody asks that's deploying the survey, and then a number of modules that are optional modules. These are ones that people can select. Site PIs, you would select if you were interested in particular research questions at your site that module topic would address. And we talked about how we go about indicating to us, to me, to HWISE, which modules you wanted included in your survey. That's using that module tracking by site sheet. That's this second image capture right in the middle of the three. From there, we create your survey for you to start off with. This is true of the HWISE-USA context, and still haven't worked out yet what it looks like in the EuroWISE context. But from that, we create a form definition. The form definition is an Excel spreadsheet that SurveyCTO uses to read in the survey with a whole bunch of parameters. So you will, at this point, presumably have put together your survey, worked with me or our EuroWISE partners or elsewhere on indicating which modules you want to deploy in your survey beyond the required modules, any optional modules, if any, and then worked with me or EuroWISE counterpart or others to set up your form definition and your team in SurveyCTO. Now, this also training also is predicated on the knowledge that you already have access to SurveyCTO, that we've already helped you set up a team, or you've already set up your own team in SurveyCTO. You've already paid for the monthly subscription access to be able to utilize SurveyCTO. Okay, so now we have this form definition, this spreadsheet with all kinds of questions and responses in it that you want to turn into, that you want to be part of your survey. And we want to turn it into something where we can actually collect the data. Well, how do we do that? That's where SurveyCTO comes in. We're using SurveyCTO and asking everyone who's deploying the HWISE survey to use SurveyCTO for a number of reasons, a bunch of which have to do with administration of it. But the primary thing is because it makes it very easy comparatively to be able to pull all the different data together. So one of the things you agree to when you deploy the survey is to share your data, anonymized, of course, but with the larger network so that we can ask and answer questions across many different contexts. In this case, the survey among high-income countries. So we use SurveyCTO. Now, I highly recommend that you install the desktop app. I'll say you can access SurveyCTO just from the web interface. So any web browser and you have your SurveyCTO account set up, you can access anything you need from the web browser, or pretty much anything you need. I do, however, suggest that for site PIs or the data managers for your site, that you consider installing the desktop app. It provides a little more functionality. There's some other usability things in the app that are that you don't have those options for on the web interface. But if you're doing just generally things, collecting data and then downloading your data, the web interface will probably give you everything you need. But the desktop app is just a lot more user-friendly and gives you some more options. Okay. Now, this training is about SurveyCTO, working in SurveyCTO. When you log into SurveyCTO from your account, this is where you'll land. It's called their dashboard. This dashboard has 5 main tabs here: the Design tab, a Collect tab, the Monitor tab, Export, and Configure. They're labeled 1 through 4. Configure just has like a little settings wheel on it. And then there's one other place I want to alert you to. It's up in the upper right-hand corner where you've logged in. There's a place in here called Visit the Support Center. We'll talk about all these in brief here. The Support Center is found under the login drop-down in the upper right-hand corner. So let's go through these one by one here. The Design tab. The Design tab is where you will have your form definition sheet. This is where your survey resides. This is the Excel survey. And this is where it lives. If you wanted to update your form definition sheet, for some reason a question isn't showing up correctly, so you need to change the question logic. You've decided to add some additional questions that are specific only to your site. Mid-stride, you want to update this. This is where you would also update your form definition sheet. So the original master lives there, depicted here by this master sheet, but you would also upload, using the upload icon here, your newest version of your survey. Or if you had other form definition surveys that you were trying to do, let's say you were doing the HWISE survey, but you also had a water quality sampling survey that you put together that was specific to your site, and you had a form definition for it. You could have multiple form definitions in there. You can see here under the example, I've got 2 listed here: the master survey sheet, from which I build out all of the site form definition sheets from your previous training, how to build your survey, developing your survey. And then I have a training sheet in here. But you could have any number of form definition sheets in here. Now, I want to point you to these additional resources. We have that SurveyCTO resources for HWISE document that we're compiling a bunch of stuff in it. It already has scores of pages of resources linked in there and how-to tips. That's under this additional resources URL link when you have access to the slides in here. But this is what it looks like on the Design tab. Okay, now this is what your form definition sheet is. This is after we've already created, you've gone through the work of saying, I'm doing the HWISE survey, so I will include the required core modules, but I've also reviewed all the optional modules, and I want to put these together. And then now we've created your form definition sheet. This is what it looks like. It's an Excel spreadsheet in SurveyCTO. So under this Design tab, if you had updates to that sheet, you would just click this Upload button right here, the Upload button, and it gives you an option to navigate on your computer to where the current existing form definition sheet is, if you wanted to update that one. And this is where you would go about doing so. Let me also mention one other thing. If you, for instance, you are working on a different machine and didn't have access to the current form definition sheet, you could also download it here using this download button. It's 3 buttons over to the right of the upload button. And that would allow you to download your form definition sheet. Let's say you were on a different computer, your laptop, and you had been normally working on your desktop and you didn't save the local copy. But the most current one you know is on your SurveyCTO site. You could also download it here. So what does it look like when we go about testing a survey? So we've submitted a survey form definition into SurveyCTO using this upload button. It now resides right there. And let's say we wanted to test it. There's a test button here. You can access tests from a number of different ways, but I typically do it through the design tab right here. And we test out the survey. So what does that look like when you're testing it out? Now, mind you, this is on the desktop version, so it'll look a little different on the mobile version, but you do have mobile version available to you. This is under the testing of what it looks like. So, well, what does an example of it look like? Well, here we're into the survey already. We've gone through the first initial questions that we all have about a few social demographic stuff, plus also, do they want to participate? Are they 18 years or older? And we've answered those questions. So now we're into the survey, just giving you an example here. This is question number 3. This is to link back to our data dictionary in the previous training. This is question 3. It's called DRK source. This is drink source, but we've named it drink source. So it's called DRK source under your form definition sheet, but that doesn't show up here. What shows up is just the numbered question and the name of the question, plus all of the responses or the choices in your form definition sheet. So in the last 4 weeks, what was your primary drinking water source? Now we're in test mode, and this is what the web version looks like. The mobile version looks something different because it's optimized for your mobile format. But when you're testing in SurveyCTO, it actually shows you, if you share the survey with somebody to preview it, it shows you both the web version and the mobile version side by side, so you can see what it looks like on a mobile device. Now, we do have translations available. We've got Spanish language translations available right now, thanks to the help of many folks who are already utilizing the survey, namely Alicia Cooperman, Manuela, and team in their El Paso work down there. But we have others who are also doing some Spanish language translations. Aminata Quilungo and Alex Bruis are doing some in the Arizona Colonias. And so we have these translations available. And if you wanted to see what it looked like in Spanish, you would just choose the Spanish drop-down option, and it shows the same question. It's still question 3, DRK source, drink source, and the same responses, the same choices, but now in Spanish. Okay, I'm going to show you again the training form, what this looks like. This is just navigating around. So right now, this is the form definition with all of the questions and answers, and the programming in the background that makes it display a particular way. And I'm just going to show you what we're looking at right now. I'm showing you the training only survey, but how you navigate around if you're in the testing mode of it. So to go to previous questions, you just use the sort of the normal forward arrow, back arrow. That will take you one question next. The double arrows with a hard bracket stop on either end means go to the very beginning or the very end of the survey. I typically avoid these when I'm in the survey just because I want to advance question by question. This is, again, the web version one. If you were in the mobile version, you'd just be swiping on a screen, swiping left and right to go forward to the next question. So I typically only use the forward, backward buttons, not the begin and end of the survey. Now, you could also just click this next button, and that's probably what I would recommend. It just avoiding accidentally hitting the wrong button when you're in there. Just click the next button as you're moving through the survey. And that's what it looks like when you're in the testing mode. But this is what it would also look like for a respondent or your enumerator team if they had it called up the form and they were starting to ask these questions of a survey participant, of the respondent. Now, you might want to update your form on the fly. I've already mentioned where you do that. It's under the upload option here, under the upload button. And I should mention that when you do upload a new version, I highly suggest that this shows a deployed version right here. I highly suggest that you change the name, the file name of your new version. Anytime you make some changes, I would just save a new copy of your form. All you have to change in it is whatever questions and responses you have, but change the file name to be appended, and I don't show it right here, but the file name in your form definition. This is that Excel spreadsheet, to have something at the end of the file name that says the current date of which you have it. That way you have multiple versions saved on your local machine of your survey. And this is particularly important if you're going through the survey, you've already deployed it. Some respondents have already and filled out the survey with one version of the form definition, and you have other respondents with a new version. This allows you quickly to go back on your own machine to find out which version did the survey respondent respond to. And SurveyCTO tells you that. It'll tell you which version number, and not here, but in a different tab. It'll show you which version number. And this allows you to go back and quickly to your form definition version sheets. If you didn't save it as a new file name, as a new copy, what happens is you have a single copy of your form definition sheet on your machine, on your local machine, and you don't know what version of the question or the answer set or which new questions were added later on just by looking at your single copy on your form definition sheet, which is why having multiple copies, versioning is important. Now, you can get back to it. SurveyCTO does that. If you have some need to go back to that, I can walk you through that. You can download, SurveyCTO keeps track of all the different versions that you have in there, and you could download those afterwards. It's just a little more problematic to do so. It's easier if you kept your own copies. Okay, the next tab is the Collect tab. This is tab number 2 in here. This is where you can set up how you collect your data. Are you doing this on a desktop version, so you're sitting behind the computer and talking to somebody who's come into the office, say, or maybe you're doing this remotely in some way. It's also where you set up your mobile devices. I'll mention here that in these first sections right here, I have these sections collapsed, but this first one showing collecting data with SurveyCTO. If I were to click the down arrow, it would show you some resources there. This is kind of the default landing page. When you open up the Collect tab, it will be opened, expanded, and it allows you to access some of their resources that they suggest for training for thinking about putting together your survey. The Collect tab is also where you would share a URL to the survey. So you could, clicking the fill out, it would actually just open up the survey itself, and you could start filling it out if you had a survey respondent there. But this is also where you click the share button. And let's say you need to email it to somebody to take a look at on your team. You would click the share button, and it gives you an opportunity. It looks like a little paper airplane opportunity to send that URL to the survey to somebody else. Now, you could also purge data here. Let's say you and your enumerator team have collected data at 5 households just as a practice, or with students that are testing it on each other, and you wanted to get rid of that data. They've already filled the forms out and submitted them, so you now have 5 respondents, it looks like, in your data set, but they're dummy respondents. They're not your actual data. This is where you could purge the data. I would say just be very careful here with purging data, because of course we don't want to purge all of your data or the incorrect data, but you can purge specific submissions, or you can purge by date. Let's say you knew that on this particular date you did survey enumerator training, you made some adjustments, and then a week later you actually started collecting the data. If you knew that, you could go back and purge also by date there, purge data. Now, it's also where you can, on the Collect tab, adjust your various survey settings. Now, we have, if we're setting up your team for you, your site or your room in our HWISE-USA house, per se, this is already set as a default for you. We'll already have set these settings up, including allow anonymous form access. We turn that off so that people can't just anonymously access it. We want people to be logged in so we know who was collecting the data, and if we had questions, we could follow back up. If we had anonymous access and I was an enumerator and filling it out, you wouldn't know who to go back to if there were questions about the data. So this is where many of these settings, the survey settings, are found, is under the Collect tab. Definitely encourage you to get familiar with those, look through those, familiarize yourself with those settings. You likely won't need to make any changes there, but let's say you do want to do some additional security settings and encrypt the data end to end. This is where you would go about setting up some of these things. There's a lot of options there. SurveyCTO has a lot of resources for these. We've linked to some of these resources in our SurveyCTO resources for HWISE document. And that's this additional resources link here. So if you have additional questions, want to dig deeper, we've provided some tips and insights there in this document, this HWISE document about SurveyCTO resources, including links to a whole bunch of other places where you could do additional trainings in the Collect tab. Okay, now we're moving into the Monitor tab. This is the third tab that you should have access to when you're on your SurveyCTO dashboard. This is where you monitor incoming survey data. So you've already deployed it. You've tested it out previously with your enumerator team. You've done all the training. You know it's in good shape. You know the question logic works. All the questions you wanted to appear did appear. All the correct word response choices. You filled in your enumerator team names there, whatever locations you want. All that stuff is good to go. And you've now deployed your survey. This is where, in the Monitor tab, you would check on incoming survey data. And I definitely recommend you check multiple times. We have particularly important over the first part of the survey. I would be checking it daily for the first maybe week as you're collecting survey data, and then maybe every few days. And we have some resources available for you in that same SurveyCTO resources for HWISE document on how to go about doing quality assurance, quality control. I'll briefly discuss it here, but definitely recommend you look at the data that's coming in. And SurveyCTO on their dashboard here under the Monitor tab has a lot of resources available for you to do that. They've got a lot of things, including their Data Explorer. The Data Explorer is accessible to you under this Monitor tab. And if you want to see more about the Data Explorer, definitely check out the resources here. There is a lot of resources available, both from us and from SurveyCTO on how to use the Data Explorer. But the Data Explorer is where you would build, say, summary reports about your data. You could perform basic calculations, field calculations about like how much time is it taking on average to complete the survey. So you can get a sense for your enumerator team, as you would expect as they get more familiar with it, that the time it takes to do the survey drops off. You could perform certain calculations. What's the average response to a particular question that's maybe particularly of interest for you? For example, if somebody had to haul water, we have a question on hauling water. If somebody was hauling water, you could, in your Monitor tab under the Data Explorer, could set up a question that in your data summary report that says, what's the average time in which it takes people to haul water? What's the range of values? You could also set flags and warnings in the Data Explorer that allow you to flag particular incoming data. Let's say you expect a range of values to be, let's say age, 18 to maybe 100 would be the average age. Of course, they have to be 18 to participate, but we'd expect values up to maybe 100 for people participating. And you could set a flag or a warning in here in the Data Explorer to say any values outside of this range, either one standard deviation or above a certain number, let's say anything above 100, would flag it for you, and you'd see it in there, and you could then take a quick look at it. Is that a keystroke error, a data entry error, or is that an actual value? And you could follow that up with the survey enumerator who conducted that survey just to find out. Or if you have access to their field notebooks, perhaps you could be just thumbing through the field notebooks. So these are the kind of things that you can do in the Data Explorer in the Monitor tab. Very, very handy. I definitely suggest you spend a little bit of time with the Data Explorer, getting familiar with it and setting up your own reports. I find it to be really insightful, particularly early on, to know know what your data looks like, but know if there's anything outside of the norm of what you might expect. It also is helpful for, let's say, your enumerator team and Jeremiah is taking twice as long as everybody else to complete the survey. It could just be the way that the people that Jeremiah is talking with happens to be in an area that has a whole bunch of wells. And so these people are answering additional questions about the wells that people who don't have wells aren't getting asked those questions. But it could also be something else. Perhaps Jeremiah just likes to talk and visit with people. So you'd be able to follow up. You could set those things and look at it and follow up. Jeremiah, how's that going? What we'd ideally like to see is this survey being completed in, X number of minutes, 32 minutes, or whatever it might be. How can I support you in speeding up how we're doing the survey, or what are the things that are going on that for you in the survey? All of these are accessible in this Data Explorer. It's really handy. I definitely recommend getting familiar with it. So please do check out all the additional resources there. Okay, in the Monitor tab is also where you can set up workflow settings. Now, setting up workflow. And when we're talking about workflow here, what I'm meaning is the way in which the data come into your SurveyCTO data repository. So as the data is coming in, what do you want to happen to it? It could be that you don't set up any workflow and the data just comes in as normal, and that might be a very normal way at which somebody sets things up. But let's say you were taking a much more active role in your enumerator team, given they're maybe new to it, or you're new to this particular survey or surveys in general, and you wanted to set it up to where all of the submissions or some of the submissions are held before being put into the data repository, held for you to take a look at, or your data manager. You could set up that workflow here under the Monitor tab. You could also review the set up the workflow to where when you hold submissions, you look at them and approve them. Let's say you wanted to go through, and there was one question of yours that was problematic in how it was initially being asked, and respondents maybe you didn't quite understand the question, so you're working on survey enumerator training. You could then say, I'm going to set up a workflow and I want to hold all submissions from this date forward until we make sure that the question is landing correctly. So then for the next 2 days, you could hold all submissions and look at them and review them yourself and say, I'm going to go to this question and take a look at it. The summary reports that I just talked about from the Data Explorer would be helpful for you to alert to those things. And then you could look at it and approve it. Okay, that's great, that one worked. Or, hey, this one actually has some problematic data in it, or I've got a question. You could, in your workflows here, set it up to where you could send it back to the numerator. Jeremiah, I've still got a question about this question here. This doesn't make sense to me. Can you please verify this is correct or change your answer? These workflows you set up here under the Monitor tab. It sends it back to me as your enumerator. I make the changes to it, whatever I need to that you've requested, submit it back. You look at it and say, great, it's good to go. Now it gets funneled into the master data set that you're collecting. So these are all set up under the workflow settings are all set up for you under, or you would set them up under the Monitor tab. This is also where you can look up specific data that's been submitted. This is looked up by what's a very unique ID. It's called a UUID key in the SurveyCTO, and this is something that happens automatically, but every single survey form that's submitted has a unique ID with it, and you could look up a particular case if there was something you wanted to look at. Say it was an example respondent that sort of epitomizes the range of experiences that you see typical in a particular area. You could set that up and pull up a particular UUID to look at. I'll also mention for all of these tabs, I'll mention it again, they're the top two, one or two boxes, sections in your dashboard have these expand or collapse buttons in there. You can see it says unhide this section. I've hidden these sections just for screen captures for our training here, but they are definitely interested in having you take a look at these as you move through here, because it has a bunch of resources and training that are available for you on it. Okay. So as you monitor incoming data, there's a whole bunch of reasons why it's a good idea to do so. We found that even when you have really robust and lengthy is not the right word, robust enumerator training, you've gone through this, spent some hours with your enumerator team, practicing it, talking about these different things on how you administer the survey, the realities of it, things that are difficult. After going through all that, it's still a good idea to take a look at your incoming data, and I suggest doing this quite frequently to begin with, and then you can taper it off as the team gets rolling, as the train gets rolling down the tracks, and it's rolling down the correct tracks. So monitoring your data in the Data Explorer is a great way to do that. I also do it by downloading some of the data for the sites in which I participated in data collection. Download the data and look at it. Also, I use Stata or R mostly for my work. So if whatever you use, maybe you use SPSS or Excel, you can download those things and take a look at it, but I definitely recommend doing that, monitoring the data. We do have a description of quality assurance, quality control in our additional resources document, that SurveyCTO resources for HWISE document. Recommend going there, but definitely recommend setting up your own workflow for quality assurance, quality control. Okay, the export tab, the fourth tab over here. This is where you download your data. You finished the survey, or maybe it's partway through and you just want to take a look at it. But let's say your survey's done. This is where you would download your completed data set, all the data, all the forms that have been submitted, each respondent's answer to all the different questions. That you find that in the export tab. You can also, under the export tab, share, let's say you created some data summaries using the Data Explorer back in the monitor tab. You've set up some data summaries and you want to share some of those summaries. You can share these things externally to have an external viewer or reviewer of it through the export tab. So you can download your data, you can export or share particular data summaries if you've set those up. You can also publish your data to other data repositories. These are services, other cloud type services. You could have your data be streaming into, say, Google Sheets, as an example. You can export your data in a number of formats that are available here. I'm just showing a screen capture right now of clicking the download the data, form data here. You can see that there's different formats, the repeat groups, the wide format or long format, submissions to include. You could say all submissions, or you could select a select number of them. In this case, it says file format is CSV. That's the default in which it downloads. But there's a number of these available to you in multiple formats for you to be able to download them and then put them into whatever you're used to using. For instance, I use Stata, other people use SPSS, but you could also put them into a mail merge template form on Word, for instance, or you could export these into Excel or Google Sheets even, is some of the cloud services. There's a lot of those things available. Those are all available to you under the Export tab. Now, if you're downloading your data, again, back to this, in this case, it's showing a CSV down at the file format at the bottom of the screen capture. But if you're exporting your data, when you export it, I definitely recommend you keep 2 copies of your data. One is a backup copy that you never touch. It's just the raw data. It's the data that comes in untouched from SurveyCTO. It's your original raw data. And then I download a second copy, but rename it something working data, whatever. That's where you would make any changes. You could, to the data, let's say you needed to enter zeros instead of having a period or just missing data. This is, you want to do that on a working data, not the original one, because if you need to go back to your original data, once you're done with SurveyCTO and you haven't paid for, you've paid for, let's say, 2 months of access to SurveyCTO. Once you're done with that, you don't have access to that anymore. So I definitely encourage you to keep a second copy of the raw data if you ever need to return to it. Now, we've got a lot of additional insights, tips, and things to consider in that SurveyCTO resources for HWISE document that I've mentioned to you a bunch of times. So that's under the additional resources here. Okay, the last tab is called the Configure tab. This is where we set up your team, or you set up your team. Who is your enumerator team in SurveyCTO for your particular site? You can also pause or resume your team or delete your team. Let's say you're completely done with your survey. You don't have to delete it. It can live there, just but you don't have access to the account anymore once you've stopped paying for it. I'll likely set up your initial team for you, at least in the HWISE-USA context. But this is where you would say add new team members to it. You haven't hired yet your enumerators, so you know it's just you and your site manager. You as the site PI and your site manager, say. You would have your 2 people there, but then once you added your enumerator team, you would add under the Configure tab, add new people with different permission levels. Now, I'm not going to go through all the permission levels. I do discuss them briefly here, and there's a lot of resources to that. Your enumerator team is quite likely to only have data collection permissions, the lowest level of permissions, or the most restricted level of permissions, where they can access the form definition and fill it in as they're asking questions of the respondents and listening to them. But that's all they could do. They could do that and submit the form, but they can't go back in and make any corrections. But there's a whole variety of levels of permissions and roles here in SurveyCTO that you want to familiarize yourself with. And if I'm helping set up your team in SurveyCTO, I will give you as the site PI, the global permissions, the full admin permissions there, the least restrictive of all of them. It's where you have access to pretty much everything you need in SurveyCTO. And then you can set permission levels for the other team members. Now, you've purchased SurveyCTO access. You could conceivably also in your team set up multiple groups within your site. Let's say you have the example I gave earlier was the HWISE survey team, but you had a second survey form in there that was water quality. You have a different team going out to the house to do water quality samples. You could set up two different teams within your team or two different groups within your team, neither of which have access, if you've given that permission level, to each other's forms. But as a bigger point too, even though we're all operating under this HWISE SurveyCTO site, you each have your own individual room that nobody else has access to. You grant access to who you would like access to. So as an example here, somebody collecting data in the Detroit site has data collection only access within the Detroit group. But they don't have access to the Galveston team. They don't have access to the Arizona team. They don't have access to any other teams. But let's say, is the example I gave here, you had two different groups within your team. One was collecting HWISE data, one was collecting water quality sampling stuff. You could make them exclusive to where neither of them see each other's forms and don't have access to each other's forms, or you could set permissions to where they could both see each other's forms. Let's say some of your enumerators are doing both of these surveys, the HWISE and the water quality. It's one of the advantages of using SurveyCTO here and the different permission levels that we set up. Permission levels, the most restrictive is the data collection only. What you will all have as site PIs is administrator access to your SurveyCTO site, to your room in the house, if you will. But there's permission levels are detailed well in SurveyCTO's documentation. Okay, this just looks like what it would look like at different survey levels, permissions levels here. So for as the example here, the dummy setup of Jeremiah through this email address only has data collection permissions, but Jeremiah at this email address has data and form permissions, can actually manage some of the forms there. Wendy has full access at this email address, that sort of thing. This is just an example of what you can set up under your team, what the different permissions look like. Okay, the last thing I'll talk about just very briefly here is the support center. There is a very robust support center at SurveyCTO. They have an incredible amount of resources available that they have put together, and also a very active community user group of resources that are put together. You'd find the support center by accessing on your dashboard in the upper right-hand corner where you sign in, clicking the down arrow and clicking Visit Support Center. Now, you have to be logged in order to access the Support Center, but when you are logged in, this is where you would go to the Support Center. This is where you can find help for all kinds of topics. You can search for any topic of interest. You can access different quick start guides and how-to videos. They have a robust video library, training library there as well, including a bunch of videos on how different people and different sites are using SurveyCTO for their work. You can engage with various community forums at their support center. You can also request help at their support center. Although I would say if you request help, actually, I'll get to that in just a second. Logged into the support center, this is what it looks like. It's a landing page, a web page, and you would just search for particular topics in here, or you could just scroll down through on their page all the different resources available. It's a long page here, but it links to tons of other resources as well. As an example, if I wanted to look at, we were just talking about permission levels, how to update a role, and I don't see that information in the SurveyCTO resources for HWISE document that we've shared with you all. It wasn't in the training video, and I'm not finding it. You could search for update role, and it finds 188 results for updating role as an example. Both community forum questions people have answered and asked and answered, and also SurveyCTO resources. How do you create a user with links to those resources? Now, SurveyCTO does have if you can't find resources there, they do have a robust help and support center that they answer typically within 2 days, but I would say they're usually quicker than that even. I usually wind up finding my responses considerably quicker than that. I would say if you're going to ask a question of the user support, and this is what it looks like, submitting a support request, I would ask that rather than you submitting a support request, that you coordinate with me on it, because it's quite likely that others are going to have the same kind of questions. And we may want to have answers available for the entire network, one of the benefits of being in a network. So I would ask that you coordinate with me and I could submit the request, and then I make those resources available, their answers to how to do these things available to everybody else. I don't necessarily need to play the middle person here in all circumstances, but because we have so many people using this SurveyCTO, and quite likely to have the same questions across multiple sites, it's nice to be able to have this information available to everyone. So if you do have something you cannot find information for here, can't find it in our training resources, I don't know the question to it, I just ask that you work with me and I'll submit the request with you as part of the request in it for the answer, so that the answers I can make sure are available to everybody else. Okay, that concludes this training on working in SurveyCTO. Again, first place to check, go to SurveyCTO for questions and responses. Second place to check would be our SurveyCTO resources for HWISE document that I've hot link in here and I've mentioned throughout. It's also the additional resources tab in all of the various slides that I've showed here. But there's all kinds of resources available for you. And if you still can't find it, reach out to me and we'll coordinate and see what I can put together here. For troubleshooting and giving answers across the network. Okay, well, thank you for your attention here, and that's weird, for your attention. Sounds like I'm in a classroom. Anyway, I'm glad the resource is available. If you do have questions, start with SurveyCTO, go to our resources document, then coordinate with me if we still can't find stuff, and we'll get some answers for you. Hope this has been helpful training, and look forward to having some more for you and interacting with you. All right. Thank you. Bye now.